A lot of people wonder why I don't carry around a smartphone. It's a strange thing not to have. I still have a phone. It's just that it's a very basic model and I only use it for calls or texts. I'm not even that old. Most figure I'm some kind of technophobe, but it's something different. My wife rolls her eyes every time she sees me making a call with it. She calls it my comfort brick. Meanwhile, she's checking out life hacks on TikTok. I've tried telling her about why I am this way a couple of times, but it's been hard to put into words. So in an effort to collect my thoughts, I'd like to tell the world about what happened to me a couple of years ago, and to an extent, what is happening still. I was working on my master's degree, but I was having a hard time finding something to write a paper about. I couldn't come up with a good subject, and time was running out. I managed to get a deadline extension, but only if I could present a suitable subject. I was about to give up when one of my professors suggested I talk to a man working in the private sector. He was a licensed physician who'd gone into private enterprise, but he was sure to have something interesting going on. I got in touch with him, and he asked me to come in the same day. Let's call him Solomon. Solomon and his team were working out of an honest-to-God laboratory. Most of their work revolved around medical hardware. So, they had sterile white rooms to protect sensitive electronics. Solomon was about 6'6" and balder than a bowling ball. He towered over his workers and had a very soft demeanor. He would calmly shake my hand and nod as I presented myself. I got the impression that he was a kind man. You notice that sort of thing. As I explained my situation, he made a suggestion. I'm working on a project called Liz. I can't share all the production details, but we collect a lot of data related to sleep. I could share that data for your paper. That was amazing news. I could easily do a study with that kind of data to back me up. I was scheduled to help Solomon and his team to collect test subject for his Liz project. It was simple enough. People were supposed to take a supplement before they went to sleep and use a headband to record their experience. It didn't matter if they slept long, short, or barely anything at all. Data was data. This was bulk collection. They'd already gone through about 20 iterations of the project, so this would be the 21st generation. I wasn't allowed to take part in the earlier versions, but I was going to get full access to the Generation 21 bulk data. There would be more than enough to cover a master's study on a related subject. I put up some posters around campus, and it didn't take long for people to sign up. A lot of folks wanted to get their foot in the door of the private sector. Having Solomon's name on a CV could be more than valuable than a quick payout. But they still got a symbolic sum as compensation for their trouble. As submissions started to roll in, Solomon brought something up. "Why don't you participate?" he said. "You could critique our methodology. We could separate your data if you think it would invalidate overall results, but I think it would grant some valuable insight." "You're sure that'd be appropriate?" "Of course," he smiled. "You're already part of this. Might as well get your hands dirty." I had a hard time saying no. I wanted to, but I couldn't. So yeah, I signed up too. We ended up with 14 people in total. Some were medical students, others were dentists. There were even a couple of veterinarians. They were all invited in for a short presentation about the study and the various items they would be using. We were pressed into a cramped meeting room around an oval table with a projector, showing an out-of-focus presentation on a sun-stained canvas. Collection takes place over 2 weeks, Solomon explained, pointing to a calendar on the screen. This allows us to account for irregularities. No worries if you miss a day or two. We've taken that into account. He showed us the items again. There was a headband that was used to record our sleep. It looked like something an 80s tennis player might use. There was a cable to charge it during the day, The other item was a small bottle of gel capsules. This is a supplement to help us better record your experience. It does little to affect your sleep. We must insist that you take one about 10 minutes before you go to bed, 20 minutes if you had a big meal. Don't bite down on it or your mouth will taste like really crunchy salt. If you don't take it, don't bother with the headband. The data will be useless. It was a nondescript bottle, CMP5. It had a printed list of known side effects, but they were so generic that it might as well have been ibuprofen. There wasn't much more to it. We all got our kits, hid at home, and that was that. I started working on my paper, charged the headband, and went on as usual. When it was time to go to bed, I did as instructed. I took a capsule, I put the headband on, and set my alarm. The headband was surprisingly comfortable. It even had a massage and heating setting. It had a thicker side, meaning you could turn it slightly and use it as a sleep mask. That suited me perfectly, as I'd wanted one for a long time. I figured I'd ask Solomon if I could keep it when the study was over. Maybe in lieu of pay. The damn thing probably had Bluetooth speakers for white noise if I bothered to check. Going to sleep was surprisingly easy. I felt at peace. I had my alarm set, and there was no disruption, no loud noises, no background hum. Just the slight saltiness of the capsule on my tongue. What's stayed with me all these years is what I dreamt on that first night. It was one of the clearest, most memorable dreams I've ever had. Not because it was amazing, but because it seemed so real. It was the first time I ever had a lucid dream, as in knowing I was sleeping. I dreamt I was at my old middle school, back in South Dakota. I walked down the hallway looking at all the pictures we'd put up. Most of the drawings just looked like math scribbles, but every now and then you'd see something you recognized. A happy farmer, someone's dog, a sunflower, but the wrong color, mostly blue. It was all so real. The slate stone texture of the floor, the soundproofed ceiling tiles that you could stick pens in if you flicked them hard enough. The wide hallways allowing students to run up and down while leaving a lane for teachers down the middle. The welcome mat outside our homeroom. I remembered the font. I dreamt about some people I hadn't thought about in years. I could see my teacher at her desk grading papers. There was a globe in the window with plenty of grubby hand marks surrounding the continental US. Whenever someone went on a holiday trip, they were allowed to put a pin on the globe to show where they were going. I ran a hand across my old desk, feeling the notches bump against my nails. Then the speaker system crackled. I turned to see my teacher sit up straight. She looked at me and spoke in unison with the announcer. Lima, India, Sierra. I took a few steps closer. She kept eye contact with me. She was still grading papers with her right hand, turning the page without looking away. Lima, India, Sierra. Someone walked past in the hallway. I could hear chatter in the background of the PA system. Some of the pictures on the wall looked funny. One of the drawings had the number 21 on it. Lima, India, Sierra. She turned her attention back to the papers, and I could feel my blood run cold. Something was wrong. Something has irreversibly changed. I turn around, and I see something, someone, and in a heartbeat, I woke up screaming. I threw the headband across the room, jumped out of bed, and I was wide awake. I'd only slept for 3 hours, but my heart was pounding out of my chest. I sprinted into the bathroom, washing my face with cold water. I looked at myself in the mirror, only to see that I'd been crying. My face was red and puffy. I had to sit on my bed for a while, holding the headband. I was shaking with adrenaline, waiting to find the peace to go back to sleep. It took me the better part of an hour. I didn't use the headband as a sleep mask after that. I just wore it as intended. I got a couple more hours, but it was a dreamless sleep. I scheduled a call with Solomon the next morning. I was halfway through a cheese and ham sandwich when he called me. I still had a stubborn cowlick that wouldn't go away, making me look like something out of a cartoon on a video call.
"First night,"
Solomon said.
"How'd it go?"
"I'm gonna be honest, not so great."
"Nightmares, huh?"
I wasn't prepared for him to admit it so openly. Before I could say anything, he cut me off.
"It's not uncommon. In fact, it's very helpful. We have more data than we need of people just sleeping. But nightmares? We don't have a lot of that. They're much more valuable to us."
"How did you know I had one?"
"It's very common.
He continued.
Some get nightmares. Some get a sense of claustrophobia. Others just don't use the headband at all and call it quits after a couple of nights."
If this is what it feels like, I get it. It was awful.
"Do you want to quit the study?"
I thought about it. I wanted to, but I couldn't afford to step off now. I had a paper to write, and I hadn't gotten access to the data yet. Chances were, if I were to abandon the project, I'd be shit out of luck. I swallowed my fears and shook my head. "No, I'm okay," I said. "But I got a question. What's Lima, India, Sierra?"
"That's just an activation phrase, Liz. It comes from the headband as a synchronization signal, sort of like when you snap a clapperboard on a movie set."
"Is it dangerous?" Solomon chuckled a little.
"It's just information."
The next night, I was hesitant about going to bed. I drank some milk, got ready, and spent a full hour scrolling on my phone. I was hoping to get so tired that I didn't care anymore. But it was difficult. I got the impression that if nightmares were valuable data, maybe Solomon induced them. Maybe that's what the pill did. When I finally went to sleep, I was so tired I couldn't keep my eyes open. And once again, I had one of the most vivid dreams of my life. My high school gymnasium completely empty. Every footstep echoed. Walls were decorated with images of important milestones. Then, at some point, it started again. Not the PA system this time, but just the omnipresent voice, as if spoken by the walls themselves. "Lima, India, Sierra." I remembered what happened last time I heard it. I spun around looking for a solution. I was aware that I was in a dream, so I tried to think in terms of dream logic. Maybe I could hide? "Lima, India, Sierra." I found this old speaker that was big enough for me to hide behind. I crawled in, closing my hiding space with a wooden panel. "Lima, India, Sierra." Quiet. The tension lifts, and I can feel myself getting lighter. Something gently tugs at my wooden panel. I resist, but I don't have a good grip. It pulls, and I pull back. A moment of silence. The panel is ripped from my hands. I see 2 feet dangling in the air in front of me as something attacks. I fall out of bed, coughing and clutching my chest. I'm crying, and I'm having trouble breathing from the snot covering my face. I'm a wreck, and I've only just woken up. I got about 4 hours of sleep that night. This would go on for a couple of nights. I was a wreck. But I had studies to take care of. I still went to class. I still worked on my paper. And I had a cheap cheese and ham sandwich in the cafeteria at lunch every day. This one time, as I sat down for lunch, I noticed I wasn't the only one yawning. Not that unusual, but I recognized a person across from me. It was one of the other people who'd signed up for Solomon's study. She was about my age, but in a different field. I could tell she was struggling too. People don't usually chuck 2 Red Bulls for lunch. I got up and walked over to her. "You're in Solomon's study, right?" "Yeah." She put her half-drunk can of Red Bull up to her temple, cooling her head. "Mind if I join you?" "Knock yourself out." She introduced herself as Norma. Midwestern gal. Started her studies later in life than most of us. She had the appearance of someone who could possibly cook one hell of a chili. Trouble sleeping? I asked, nodding to her energy drinks. Yeah, how about you? Same. We sat there for a moment, exchanging a couple of pleasantries. I was doing my master's thesis. She was about to start an internship. I hear this phrase, I said. Whenever I hear it, I know it's about to get bad. She looks up, nodding enthusiastically. We say it at the same time. Lima, India, Sierra. Her eyes light up. Yes, she exclaims. That's it. I hear that one thing, and then he's just there. Exactly, I say, then pause. Wait, who's there? You know, the person, thing, with the seam? What? It's like a person, but with like a seam down the middle. Maybe it's just me. The following night, I try to look a little closer. I go into my dream with a mission to gather information. Not only am I unusually aware of myself dreaming, but I also look closer at the environment. That time, I was at the beach. A childhood memory. I could see my sister and mother swimming in the shallows. My father was there too, leaning back in a sun chair with a book. Then he turned to me, looking up over the pages. Without missing a beat, he turned a page and spoke aloud. Lima, India, Sierra. And he repeated it over and over. And while the others played, like I remembered, I was spinning around and looking for whatever Norma had been talking about. As I did, I noticed little details in the background. One of the billboards had changed text. Initial contact, 2 hours, 41 minutes, 18 seconds. After Dad repeated those same words for the third time, I felt a sense of calm, then terror. I spun around, looking every which way, only for something to change. I got a glimpse of someone pale, floating in mid-air. Someone humanoid, but the head looked a bit bulbous. It didn't move its arms, just its vibrating chest. Then I was awake. I didn't notice the transition until I gasped for air. I started having lunch with Norma regularly. We would share our experiences and discuss what we'd seen. For example, I shared the strange billboard text. She, on the other hand, had seen something similar. I dreamt about my high school graduation, she said, but my diploma looked like an email. An email? What did it say? I couldn't read it all before it got to me, but there was an address. She handed me a slip of paper. I almost choked on my sandwich. It was Solomon's private email, the one I'd been handed by a professor when I first reached out to him. He didn't give this out to just anyone. I double-checked my phone and showed her it was the same. That don't make sense, she mumbled. How can anything from a dream be real? There were more dreams, and every time, I would get little glimpses. I would be someplace familiar, and at some point, I would hear those damn words. It could be bird chirping in the window, a TV running in the background, a ringtone, an alarm clock, a passing car. There was always something. Lima, India, Sierra. Then something would happen. Something would attack. I usually saw it just before I woke up. For example, its fingers were tightly webbed. They couldn't flex. Also, it wasn't just pale. It was a light touch of green, like dry grass. And in every way I saw it, its feet never touched the ground. I would wake up screaming, crying, or falling out of bed. One time, I was already standing up before I knew I was awake. I would feel so bad about going to bed that I'd end up staying up way too late, just making things worse. I tried to tell myself that this whole thing was on a timer, and that by the end, I'd have secured a future. But it was hard to keep appearances up. My lunches with Norma later extended to others in the same study. I guess Solomon hadn't counted on us all going to the same cafeteria. There was Elmer, Candace, Joseph, Pat, and Misha. Everyone had a similar experience. Elmer swore that the thing didn't have a face. Candace said it looked like it hung in the air, like a propped-up scarecrow. Joseph said it was bald, like Solomon. Pat said it never moved. It just appeared in mid-air. Misha, on the other hand, barely said anything at all. He hated just thinking about the damn thing. Norma was adamant about what she'd seen. The thing had a seam down the middle, but you could only see it when it got really close, kinda like the spine of a leaf. And we all knew that just before waking up. It did something sudden and dangerous, but we never remembered what. I think it was Candace who came up with the name, Floating Man. It was as good a description as any. But more than that, it was strangely consistent. We could all see the same thing, no matter the environment. How could a single image resonate through several people at once? How can you share a dream? I remember us all sitting there, long after we'd finished our meals. No one knew what to say. What we'd experienced was unheard of. Even if one could induce a nightmare, it was unprecedented to have a single shared image, especially one that was so clear. "I think it's the pills," I said. "I don't think they're supplements. I think they're causing this." "You think so?" Norma asked. Solomon kinda hinted at it. He said having nightmares is valuable data. Everyone at the table groaned. It made sense. A bunch of underpaid students being used as guinea pigs. "Could be some kind of mild Parkinson drug," Elmer suggested. "Dopamine agonists." "You really think they'd slip us something like that?" Joseph asked. "That's a lawsuit waiting to happen." "Unless it was in the fine print," Candace added. "Or it's something milder like SSRIs." "We should try something," I suggested. "What if, for just one night, we skip the pill? If we still get nightmares, it's the headband. If it's the pill, we can have it tested." It was an experiment. We liked experiments. We exchanged numbers and started a group chat to keep each other updated on our progress. I felt good going to bed that night. Either way, I was going to wake up the next day with some answers. I willfully picked up the bottle of capsules, rattled it, and whacked a finger. "Not tonight, fuckers." I put on some music, crawled into bed, and put the headband on. I checked in with the others. Some had already gone to bed. Others were still psyching themselves up. Norma was admittedly nervous. This whole thing would be a strange blip in the data, for sure. But Solomon had already said he'd accounted for that. One day here and there wasn't all that bad. When I finally fell asleep that night, I felt confident. I didn't even realize I was asleep at first. It felt like closing my eyes and opening them again. But when I opened them, I was somewhere else. It was this shopping mall my mom and I used to go to when I was a kid. Most of the stores were still stocked with early 2000s fashion, and a handful of passers-by mirrored that. I could see my mother on a bench, enjoying a soft surf. I walked around a little, feeling my confidence fade. Something was different this time. It was still one of those vivid dreams, but something felt wrong. A man in a stall turned his attention to me, looking across the hall. "Lima." I sighed. It was going to happen, pill or not. It had to be the headband. I knew a comp sci guy. He could probably look into how the hell that thing worked. I sat down, resigning myself to another scare. A woman walking out of a clothing store turned her head towards me while still walking the other way, speaking in a conversational tone. "India." Looking around, I could sense something was off. There were other conversations happening. There was this young couple sitting at a juice bar, for example. They were having a conversation, but it didn't make any sense. They were lovingly looking into each other's eyes, as one said, "Induction stabilized. Engagement in approximately 300 feet. The other kissed her hand and responded, Suppressor offline. Residual effectiveness 65%. Then they both turned to me, their faces slack. Sierra. I looked around. They returned to the conversation. One of them would say a number, then the other would say a lower number. They would be counting down, but not like a clock. It took me a moment to realize they were talking about distance. 200 feet, 100 feet, 50 feet. Attention shoppers. A speaker crackled. All systems nominal. 40 feet, 30 feet. I looked around, but I couldn't see anything. Why was this feeling different? I stepped out of the open, pressing my back up against the store window. They were still speaking, and the number were going down, but there was nothing for me to see. It had to be behind me. I turned around, but there was only a store mannequin, a blank, featureless face, slumped shoulders, and as I looked a little closer, it had a seam down the middle of its body. Something smacked into my chest. I felt a piercing pain as I was flung backwards, knocking over the table the two lovers were using. They just stood back up, ignoring me completely. I touched my shoulder, only to feel real physical pain. There was blood on my hand. I wasn't waking up. The floating man had something moving in his chest as the seam closed. It pushed through the glass of the store window, moving through it without breaking it. I could hear a rhythmic pitter-patter as something solid touched the tiled floor. This thing wasn't just floating. It was more like it was being held up. And it was still coming for me. I ran up the escalator, passing an old woman as I went. She looked at me, shaking her head. Damage assessment. Moderate. I didn't have time to think. Even then and there, my shoulder ached. I could feel the pain through my body. Looking back down, I could see the floating man coming closer, always a couple of inches off the ground, not flying across the room. I hurried past the hot dog stand. The text on the front made me pause. Lima, India, Sierra. I pushed the cart aside, hoping it would slow down whatever was coming my way. I passed a poster on the wall listing timestamps along with initials. It sort of looked like the way we structured bulk data. Was information from the study leaking into my nightmare? I hurried into the bathroom. There was another man there, washing his hands. I rushed into a stall, locked the door, and climbed up on the toilet. It took some effort to climb up, as it really felt like I'd been pierced through the shoulder. The nerve damage alone was enough to make my eyes water, and I had trouble staying quiet. I closed my eyes as hard as I could and bit my lip, hoping to distract myself from the pain. I didn't hear any doors open, just the pitter-patter of something taking careful steps. Then, the man washing his hands stopped and spoke. Cortisol spike. Engagement in 3, 2, 1. A blank face passed straight through the stall door. I screamed as it pressed its chest against me. The floating man was so close that it could almost be a hug, making me look over its shoulder and past it. There was something behind it, something holding it up, like a puppet. The seam in its chest opened. I tried pushing it back, only to have my hand pierced by a bone-like protrusion. It went straight through the back of my hand, right below my left ring finger. It retracted and prodded again, lopping off the top of my middle finger entirely. It plopped against the floor tiles like I'd dropped a piece of sausage. I've never felt anything like that. Never. It wasn't just pain. It was a constant throbbing, nerve-searing pain. I braced myself against the back of the stall and kicked, pushing this thing out through the door. It gave me enough space to get out, turn a quick left and run. I could feel it closing in as the pitter-patter followed. I got out of the bathroom, but I was bleeding profusely. It was only then that it hit me. I was lightheaded. How the hell can you be lightheaded in a dream? What happens when you fall asleep in a dream? What if you pass out? What if you die? I ran past the poster on the wall with timestamps. Some of the lines were crossed out. Making my way back into the main hall, I stood in the middle of the crowded mall, doing the only thing I could bring myself to. I screamed for help. I'm standing there bleeding from my shoulder and hand, screaming for help. And all I see are these neutral faces turning my way. 190 BPM, adrenaline spiking. I kept screaming, but no one did anything. And from around the corner, I see the floating man. I close my eyes, scream and tear at my face, begging myself to just wake the fuck up. For a brief moment, I managed to force my eyes open. I'm in my bed. I'm so sweaty that the sheets are sticking to me. I try to speak, but it just turns into a moan. My mouth is wide open and cotton-like, and I have no sense of control over my body. I'm not awake, but I'm not asleep. I flop my arm to the side, only to see blood on my hand. I try to force myself to move, to get out of bed, but nothing happens. I can hear myself snoring as my eyes start drifting downward. My eyes close, and I'm back. But it's somewhere new. It's a traffic jam on the highway, a late afternoon, probably a memory. Someone is honking, and we're miles away from the closest exit. As soon as I can move, I get out of my car and I go on foot. I pass by car after car, and then I stop. Something tickles my mind. I look a little closer at one of the cars, only to see Candace. She's leaning back in her seat. Something has torn through her chest, breaking her rib cage wide open. There's blood on the windshield. I try to convince myself that it's a dream. I say it out loud. I say it like a mantra, and as I do, her body slumps to the side, her eyes fixed on me. Lima. I shake my head. I run as fast as I can, and despite it all being a dream, I can feel my thumping chest. Why is there still pain in my hands? Why is my shoulder still bleeding? I pass by a car with an open window. The driver fans themselves with a newspaper as a radio host speaks.
India.
I keep saying no, like there is someone there to listen. I put my hands over my ears, hoping it will stop if I just don't hear it. I close my eyes as hard as I can. And when I open them, I see a license plate. Sierra. I dive under a car as something breaks a window behind me. I'm almost crushed as an immense weight stepped down on the car above me, but I manage to get out with just a sprained foot. I see the shadow of the floating man in the late afternoon sun. I pull on a door and get inside a random car, only for that blank face to pass straight through the passenger side window. Something grabs me by the chest and close and pull me through the door like it was made of paper. A door is between me and the floating man, and something slams against it. I'm dropped on the asphalt like a wet towel. I try to get back on my feet, but I'm not fast enough. I pick the door up and wield it like a shield as something slams into it, over and over. I can see a sharp bone pierce through, just inches away from me. I push back as the door is ripped from me. I'm wide open, and this thing is just a couple of feet away. I'm bleeding, limping, and wheezing for air. I step back, but I can tell I won't be fast enough. Not this time. The seam of its body opens all the way from the top of its head to the crotch. The floating man separates into two separate pieces as something reveals itself. There's a presence behind it, holding the two pieces up like a hand puppet. I can't tell what I'm really looking at. 6, maybe 8 legs, 2 halves of what looks like a human body hanging from 2 front limbs. Mimicry to keep you looking where it wants. And there's a head, a circular set of eyes arranged in something resembling a mix of honeycomb and the seed pod of a flesh-like lotus. It's drifting as dozens of bones poke in and out of would-be eyes. and it descends on me, unfolded, primal and hungry. I wake up, but I'm not breathing. I've fallen out of bed, accidentally losing my headband. I'm on the floor, having knocked the air out of my lungs. I'm bleeding. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I try to get up, but I'm limping. How can my foot hurt from a dream? I still can't breathe. I count 20 seconds. I get to the bathroom and topple over the sink. It cracks and falls, sending me to the ground. A piece of ceramic bumps against my chest, and something dislodges from my throat. I spit out a piece of cartilage, bloody and raw. As I lay on the bathroom floor, I can hear my phone exploding with messages and missed calls. I knew it was bad. I knew it. But for a moment, I just drew in breath and thanked whatever God may be to finally truly be awake. I couldn't speak, but I managed to call for help. Doctors would later explain that I had severe damage to my windpipe. I had several burst blood vessels, most of which were concentrated around my arm, stomach, and shoulder. They thought I'd fallen down a flight of stairs. They did not accept the explanation that it all happened in my sleep. It was impossible. The body can't self-destruct like that. When I got a chance to catch up with my messages and calls, I realized I wasn't the only one who'd gotten hurt. Norma was in surgery. Pat had a broken leg. Candace wasn't even answering. We'd later find out she'd died in her sleep. They couldn't find any connection. The pills we took were just a mineral supplement. The headband was flashy lights, a speaker, some electrodes, and a memory card. Nothing malicious. I ended up staying in the hospital overnight. Before I left the next day, I had a surprising visitor. No one came to announce him, and no one prepared me. He walked right in. Solomon. I was still in bed, and he sat down next to me. He almost looked apologetic. "You alright?" he asked. I shook my head, pointing to my throat. He said, nodding. "Sorry, we've been adamant about people taking the suppressor pill, but we had no idea Liz was effective enough to." He paused himself, shook his head, and smiled. He looked excited. "I mean, you had some residual effects. You were technically still protected, and it still managed to do all this. Can I see?" He stepped closer, and I held up an arm, shielding myself. With my other hand, I buzzed for a nurse. Sorry, I'm just curious. This is a great development. We've got enough to get started on the next phase. I am more than thankful, and I want you to know that." Solomon got up, heading for the door before a nurse could get there. He looked back a final time. "It really is just information. And information is so much cheaper than, say, a missile." Despite it all, Solomon was true to his word. I got a great recommendation. I finished my master's paper, and I could put my work on his project on my CV. I don't even know why, but mentioning I worked on the liminal intrusion system, LIS, has opened all kinds of doors. Private sector, government, I could take my pick. Candace passed away in her sleep. Norma tried to look into it, but all signs pointed to a brain aneurysm. None of us who skipped out on the pill that night was spared. The study was called off, not because it was deemed the cause, but because they got all the data they were looking for. I've come a long way in my career since then. Solomon is still active, and his team have come a long way since they had to use headbands. I think they solved their visual transmission problems. Wouldn't surprise me if all they need is lights now. That's why I don't use a phone anymore. I know what they're capable of doing. I know that if I step too far out of line or say something I'm not supposed to, I could go to sleep one night and never wake up. And the worst thing is, I'd know it's coming. I just need to hear those 3 words, and I know It's happening. Lima, India. Sierra.